Have you ever found yourself completely caught between this cinematic, swept-off-your-feet fantasy and the cold, messy, unavoidable reality of a situation?
Oh, absolutely. The classic tug of war.
Right. Because, the movie playing in your head features this flawless romance or a perfectly executed career pivot, or maybe a seamless creative collaboration.
But the actual day-to-day life of that pursuit is just full of, well, unswept floors and awkward conversations.
Yeah, constant practical compromises. It is such a universal human tension, and today we are going completely under the surface of that exact friction.
It really is the ultimate battle between the ideal and the actual. I mean, we crave that frictionless fairy tale, but we are required to actually inhabit the physical, demanding world.
Exactly.
And the sources you've brought us today tackle that divide with a rather striking level of precision.
They really do. For today's deep dive, you have provided us with a truly fascinating pairing of texts. Both of these are for the date of March 8th, 2026. And they're both from Tarot by High C, which you can find at tarotbyhic.net. We're looking at two connected pieces here that approach the same cosmic weather, just from totally different angles.
Which is a brilliant way to do it.
Yeah. So the first is an astrological forecast focusing on a specific event, which is
Wow.
Venus conjunct Saturn. And the second is this companion StoryScope, a short fictional narrative titled The Ledger of Stars.
And like I said, it's just a remarkably effective way to digest this kind of information. We get the architectural blueprint of the astrology first, and then we get to see the house actually built and lived in through the narrative fiction.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And our mission for this deep dive is to really explore these sources to learn how we can successfully separate devotion from delusion.
Right.
We're looking for the tools to answer the ultimate grounding question for all of our passions, our relationships, and projects, which is this sustainable? Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the astrological forecast.
Let's do it.
Since you listening are likely already well-versed in the archetypes of these planets, we definitely don't need to dwell on the basics. But we do need to look at how this specific forecast frames their interaction, because it sets up a very distinct dynamic for this Venus-Saturn conjunction.
What's fascinating here is the mechanics of the conjunction itself. Because, this isn't an opposition where the planets are staring each other down from across the sky.
Right, they aren't fighting.
Exactly. And it isn't a square creating pure friction. A conjunction is a total fusion of energies. They're occupying the exact same space.
Literally in the same room.
Yeah. The forecast emphasizes that this transit forces a seamless collision between what we desire and what we are actually responsible for. So work and play, love and duty.
They suddenly have to figure out how to coexist.
Exactly.
And the text points out the psychological weight of that fusion, too. Venus, of course, wants the montage sequence. It thrives on amplified emotional projections, the aesthetic idealization of a situation.
The soft lighting.
Right. But when it fuses with Saturn in this specific forecast, it can't just float on the vibe anymore. Saturn operates as the cosmic auditor.
The auditor, yeah.
It comes in and demands to see the structural integrity of the fantasies Venus has been spinning.
It's a very sobering influence. But I think it's important to note the text is careful not to frame Saturn as the enemy of romance or desire.
Which is such a common misconception.
Huge misconception. Instead, it frames this energy as a demand for maturity. Saturn isn't destroying the house Venus built. It's really just checking to see if the foundation can actually hold the weight of the roof.
Checking the facts before chasing a feeling.
Exactly. The forecast explicitly states that.
Which inevitably leads to some pretty heavy psychological processing. The text notes that under this transit, difficult closures or decisions that require both heart and backbone must be made.
Heart and backbone.
Yeah, keep turning that phrase over. Heart and backbone. It implies that you need the vulnerability to desire something deeply, but you also need the rigid spine to stand up for what is real.
Even if it means letting go of a beautiful illusion.
Exactly.
And that brings the lens directly to you listening right now. The text poses a deceptively simple question that serves as the anchor for this entire transit.
The big question.
Right. Whether you are examining your current relationships, your financial portfolios, or even just your core personal values, you have to look at your pursuits and ask, is this sustainable?
Yeah.
The forecast promises that if you lean into this fusion, leaning into both the heart and the backbone, some connections will deepen through honest conversation, but it definitely carries a caveat.
It warns that other dynamics will reveal cracks that simply cannot be ignored anymore.
It is an uncompromising reality check.
It really is. Which brings us to our second source, the StoryScope, the ledger of stars. This is where we get to see this abstract Venus-Saturn fusion play out in a very tangible, emotional space.
That's so well done.
We are transported to the small coastal town of Brindlewick. And the atmosphere the text builds is just incredibly deliberate. It's the night the local cinema is reopening after being closed for 15 years.
The author's choice of setting is brilliant when you view it through the astrological lens we just discussed, because a cinema is the ultimate Venusian space.
Oh, for sure.
It is literally a dark room where people gather to watch light project beautiful illusions onto a blank screen. It is a monument to fantasy.
And yet the text grounds it in such tactile, decaying reality. The tired, rose-colored velvet seats. The sky outside is unusually clear, like someone polished the constellations.
And that one specific detail.
Oh, the projector. Yes, it says, the old projector groans like an elderly violinist warming stiff fingers.
Such a great line.
It really establishes this mood of forgotten magic waking up but struggling against the rust of reality. And at the center of this whole operation is our protagonist, Elias Harrow.
Elias is the human embodiment of the Saturn archetype in this narrative. He inherited this cinema from his aunt, along with a modest mountain of debt. Right. And he has a town-wide reputation for taking practical things far too seriously. He is focused on the light bulbs, the structural integrity of the roof, the financial ledger.
But I'd argue there's a hitter Venusian streak in him, too. Or else he would have just sold the building to clear the debt, right?
That's a very fair point.
Instead, he's reopening it. And standing in a lobby with him is his friend Nora. She has her arms crossed, playing the skeptic.
As one does.
Right. She points out that most people reopen a cinema with a blockbuster or some big crowd pleaser, not a mystery screening with no title.
But Elias counters that it isn't a mystery, it's an experiment.
Yeah, he has hung a single poster that just reads, "One Night Only, the film that shows you the truth."
That is a wildly bold claim to make to a small town.
Eagerly.
But the text reveals that Elias has a very specific hidden catalyst for this experiment. Because 3 weeks prior, while he was clearing out the projection room, he found an old ledger wrapped in silk.
His late aunt's ledger.
Right. And this isn't a financial ledger. It's filled with neat columns of names, dates, and these strange, highly perceptive notes.
It is a literal catalog of the town's relationships, categorized by their structural integrity. Give us a sense of what the aunt was actually recording in there.
She was essentially performing the Saturnian audit on the town's Venusian dynamics. There is an entry for Margaret and Lyle, accompanied by the note, "Devotion confirmed."
Ah.
Then there is Arthur with the note, "Chasing illusion," and Diana, whose note simply reads, "Truth, painful but necessary."
Wow.
She was tracking whether these connections were built on enduring reality or fragile fantasy. And at the very back of the ledger, Elias finds an instruction. It says, "When hearts lose their compass, let the cinema show them the difference between longing and life."
The difference between longing and life, I mean, that captures the entire astrological forecast in a single sentence. Here's where it gets really interesting out.
Oh, yeah.
Elias initially dismisses the ledger as eccentric nonsense, but then he flips to the final page and he finds his own name.
His own name.
The entry reads, "Elias must learn that love cannot survive on imagination alone." And he has absolutely no memory of writing it.
It forces a severe reevaluation of his character. This hyper-practical, sensible man who supposedly only cares about debt and light bulbs.
Yeah.
He has actually been living in a profound state of delusion when it comes to his own internal life. He has been surviving on imagination.
The ledger acts as the first mirror, calling out his hypocrisy.
Exactly.
So we move to the night of the screening. The cinema is packed to capacity.
Mm-hmm.
By 8 o'clock, couples are sitting shoulder to shoulder in those velvet seats.
The tension is palpable.
The text describes it perfectly. Some are holding hands tightly, while others are actively avoiding each other's eyes. The whole town is buzzing with this kind of nervous speculation.
Yeah.
Elias steps onto the small stage, gives a brief, ominous warning that the film might feel invasive and that the doors are locked if anyone wants to leave. And then the lights dim.
Meanwhile, Nora is watching him from the front row with a raised eyebrow, really serving as the grounded anchor in the room. The projector flickers to life, and the narrative shifts into the surreal.
The text describes the opening of the film as a hazy glow, like fog drifting through a dream. It feels incredibly ethereal, pure Venus projection.
Pure fantasy.
But then the shapes sharpen into focus. The screen shows Thomas and Lena, the couple who own the local bakery. We see them walking along the harbor, laughing effortlessly while gulls circle overhead.
Right.
It is the idealized, romanticized image of their life that they likely present to the town.
But the film doesn't allow the montage to linger. The scene abruptly fractures, the illusion is stripped away, and we are shown the stark reality of their dynamic.
The unswept floors.
Literally. Lena is standing entirely alone in the bakery kitchen, and the text emphasizes the absolute exhaustion etched deeply into her face. Meanwhile, Thomas is out at the front counter, casually flirting with a tourist.
The shift is so jarring. A murmur ripples through the audience. Thomas actually shifts in his seat and whispers, "That's not real."
But the narrative implies that it is the profound underlying truth of their relationship. The performative devotion versus the grueling, unbalanced reality.
Yeah. And then the film pivots to another couple, Miriam and Claire. The screen shows them in their living room, locked in a sharp, brittle argument. The words exchanged are mean and defensive.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the astrological transit, this next transition is crucial. We often assume Saturn only brings bad news or harsh limits.
Right, the auditor usually brings bad news.
Exactly. But the scene on screen dissolves from that brittle argument into something much quieter and warmer. Miriam comes home late, bringing 2 cups of tea. Claire is waiting by the window.
I love this part.
And that defensive anger just melts away to an awkward, deeply honest conversation that neither of them had possessed the courage to initiate before.
Right in the theater, Claire reaches out and takes Miriam's hand. The audience is completely silent at this point. The text makes a profound observation here about the nature of the film and, by extension, the nature of this astrological energy. It states that the film was not cruel. It was precise. It acted like a mirror, polished until every single crack, but also every hidden vein of gold, became visible.
It exposed the fragile dreams that were balanced entirely on wishful thinking, like Thomas and Lena. But it also revealed the quiet tenderness buried under stubborn pride, like Miriam and Claire.
It forces the viewer to look at the receipts.
It really is the literal manifestation of Saturn demanding that Venus acknowledge what is actually happening in the room rather than what is playing in the imagination.
And Elias is standing in the back, watching this unfold, whispering to Nora that he doesn't entirely understand how the film is doing this. And then the projector whirs, the gears click, and Elias feels his stomach drop completely.
Because the screen goes dark and when the light returns, he is the subject.
It shows him and Nora. The scene is set beneath the canopy of paper lanterns at the town's summer festival. They are sitting together, laughing, sharing a bottle of cheap wine. Elias recognizes the memory instantly. It was a specific night 3 years ago. The festival had ended, the crowds had dispersed, and the 2 of them had stayed behind, talking till the sun came up.
A very cinematic memory.
Very. But the text notes a critical detail about the reality of that night. Elias had nearly told Nora how he felt about her. But he panicked. He swallowed the words. He chose silence.
He chose the safety of the imagination over the unpredictable risk of reality. He kept the fantasy pristine in his head, where it couldn't be ruined by logistical complications or rejection.
But the film on the screen rewrites history. It shows what would have happened if he had actually spoken. The projected Elias looks at the projected Nora and says, "I think I might be in love with you."
Wow.
The Nora on screen blinks in surprise and then smiles slowly. The entire cinema, including the real Elias and Nora, is watching this alternate reality play out in dead silence.
And this is where the narrative uses the medium of film brilliantly, because the scene literally fractures down the middle. The screen splits, presenting 2 highly distinct, divergent possibilities for their future based on that single confession.
The divergence is fascinating. Possibility number 1 shows them attempting a traditional romance. But the film reveals that this romance is built entirely on the nostalgia of that one perfect night and a mountain of unspoken, idealized expectations.
Because it lacks a sustainable foundation.
Right. The text says it collapses under its own weight within a single year, leaving them both quietly estranged and heartbroken.
It is the delusion path, the beautiful architectural rendering with absolutely no structural support. It just cannot survive the friction of daily life.
Then we see possibility number 2, the devotion path. In this timeline, they don't immediately leap into a cinematic romance. They keep their friendship intact, but they begin to speak with a radical honesty about what they actually want, their fears and their flaws.
A very Saturnian approach.
Yes. The text explicitly notes that this path becomes not cinematic, but enduring. Their bond deepens into something far steadier than a summer festival romance.
This raises an important question that reaches far beyond the boundaries of this fictional town. How often do we mirror Elias's exact behavior?
Oh, constantly.
We hoard these shiny, nostalgic fantasies in our minds, constantly replaying the what-ifs of a career, a creative project, or a romance. We choose the perfect, unblemished potential over the grounded, often tedious reality sitting right in front of us.
Because reality is messy.
Right. We become terrified that if we speak honestly or if we actually attempt the project, we will ruin the magic. But the astrology and this story argue the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Honesty might shatter the illusion, but it is the only tool capable of building a connection that actually lasts.
The projection flickers one last time, the screen goes stark white, and the house lights rise. The text emphasizes the atmosphere in the room. There is no swelling orchestral music, no rolling credits.
Just silence.
There is only the heavy, undeniable sound of 100 people sitting in velvet seats, completely absorbing the unfiltered truth they were just handed.
The town has been forced into a collective reckoning. They all have to answer the question, is this sustainable?
And as the deep dive moves toward its conclusion, we get to see the immediate aftermath of that reckoning. The atmospheric details the author uses here are just gorgeous.
Really evocative.
The text describes the sea wind outside the cinema smelling of salt and possibility. You have couples like Miriam and Claire lingering by the ticket booth, speaking softly, leaning into the devotion. And you have Thomas hurrying down the street after Lena, the illusion finally broken, forcing a necessary confrontation.
The mirror did its work. The structural integrity of the town's social fabric has been tested, and people are reacting to the results of the audit.
Elias is the last to leave. He locks the heavy wooden doors of the cinema, and he turns to find Nora waiting for him. She is leaning against the iron railing, overlooking the harbor.
Such a great scene.
The author includes a beautiful detail here, describing the moon floating above the dark water like a patient witness. Nora looks at Elias and breaks the silence. She says, "That film, it wasn't about fantasy." And Elias just nods. Nora continues, "It was about sustainability."
She synthesizes the entire experience perfectly. She completely bypasses the magical realism of the ticking projector and cuts straight to the core of the Satonian lesson.
The weight of the split-screen future is just hanging there between them. Elias finally takes a breath and takes the risk he was too afraid to take 3 years ago at the festival. But he doesn't do it with a grand, sweeping cinematic monologue.
Right.
He admits that he has spent years imagining what might happen if they cross the line, but he confesses that living in the imagination isn't the same thing as actually living a life.
Which represents a massive psychological shift for him. The man who hid his romanticism behind ledgers and light bulbs is finally integrating the two halves of his psyche. He is dropping the Venusian delusion.
He tells her he doesn't want to keep wondering forever. And then he delivers what Nora laughingly calls the least romantic confession in history. He looks at her and says, "I care about you, deeply, but I don't want a romance that survives only in nostalgia or fantasy. If we try something, it has to be real, messy, sustainable."
Real, messy, sustainable. It is the absolute antithesis of the flawless montage playing in his head for the last 3 years. He is actively inviting the awkwardness and the effort into the dynamic.
Yeah.
And for Nora, who has been the grounded skeptic from the beginning, it is exactly the foundation she needs to hear proposed.
She laughs, steps away from the railing, and takes his hand. She tells him she isn't interested in fairy tales either. They don't fall into a passionate embrace. They simply agree to start with coffee the next morning and see if reality can be as compelling as the movies.
That's perfect.
And the story closes with a lingering shot of the old projector inside the dark cinema. It is ticking as it cools down, sounding like a clock that has just finished a very important, very heavy job.
It delivered the necessary audit, and the hard truth ultimately liberated them from the weight of their own expectations.
So what does this all mean? Well, as we step away from the sources today, this deep dive has shown us, through both the architectural theory of the stars and the emotional reality of a beautifully crafted story, that real magic does not stem from cinematic illusions.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't come from applying a soft focus filter to ignore the structural flaws in our relationships, our careers, or our lives. True devotion comes from the difficult work of aligning our deepest Venusian desires with our rigorous Saturnian responsibilities.
Sad.
As Elias realizes by the end of the night, when you finally find the courage to drop the flawless fantasies and embrace the unswept floors of reality, the stars stop feeling like distant, unreachable illusions. They start functioning like actual coordinates. They provide a tangible map to navigate the life you are actually living.
That is a powerful synthesis. And it leads me to one final consideration for you to mull over as you go about your day. We've spent a lot of time discussing the value of choosing reality over fantasy. But consider the morning after Elias and Nora get that coffee.
Yeah.
The magical projector is turned off, the cinematic swelling music is gone. It's just two people sitting across from each other in a regular cafe. When you finally choose the grounded, sustainable reality for your own life, there is often a necessary yet rarely acknowledged period of grief for the beautiful, flawless fantasy you had to kill in order to get there. The illusion was safe, and letting it go hurts. So as you evaluate your own pursuits today, ask yourself, are you prepared to mourn the perfection of the illusion in order to actually survive the reality?